Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of 1 Samuel. Today we're in 1 Samuel chapter 8. Yesterday we read the text from this chapter, and today we want to look at some of the lessons that are found here. And as we mentioned yesterday in our introduction to chapter 8 is really a turning point in the accounts of what's transpiring. We've been focusing in on the work of Samuel and the things that have happened with him, but now Samuel is getting old. And his sons, as is going to be described, are not walking in his footsteps. And so the people are going to ask for a king. What are some of the things that we can learn from chapter 8? Let's notice three things today. The first one we've just mentioned, but I want to delve into it just a little bit deeper. And that is the description of Samuel's sons. Samuel's sons are not going to be like their father. And yet, you're going to see a different response toward Samuel than you saw toward Eli. You have a situation which in many ways seems similar, but there are a couple of distinctions to be made here in what is said. I want you to notice what's said in verse 3. He says, "His sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice." Remember that one of the main distinctions between Eli's sons and Samuel's sons is that Eli's sons were priests. Samuel's sons are described as being judges over Israel. They are perverting judgment. They are not perverting worship. And while those are not necessarily better or worse forms of perversion, they are distinctive in that they are not in and of themselves inhibiting the people's ability to worship God. Are they wrong? Yes. Does it appear that Samuel dealt with them differently than Eli dealt with his sons? Yes, it does, because of the way that God responds to Samuel. But that being said, we also need to understand that they're not working in the exact same field that Hophni and Phinehas were. And so, therefore, their means of dishonesty and their means of bribe taking and things of that nature was not of such a nature that it affected things in the same way that Hophni and Phinehas's sins did. It doesn't make it right. Doesn't mean that God batted his eyes at it and didn't do anything about it, but rather that it was distinctive in the means and the processes by which it was carried out. So something important to remember when you're examining chapter 8. The second thing is found in verses 7 and 8. Because here you have God speaking to the children of Israel through Samuel. They are begging for a king, and Samuel is upset because of this. Obviously, he feels that it is a rejection of him, even though in many ways it is a rejection of his sons. But God comes back and he says, "They have not rejected you, but they have rejected me." Remember, God is the one who has been their ruler. God is the one who has been their king. And yet they want a physical presence as their king. They want somebody who is going to lead them into battle, somebody who's going to stand at the front of the lines, and he's going to be the one that they can point to, like all the other nations, and say, "This is our king." It's interesting to note that the word rejected carries with it the idea of separating themselves from, or to discourage, or to otherwise cut off. God says it's not you that they've rejected. It's me. And ultimately, while Israel does not fully understand their response and what it is that their response is doing, it is the reality of the situation. But then in the third place, I want you to notice, and we're not going to take the time to read all of it in verses 11 through 18, but I want you to notice the warning that Samuel is going to give to the people about kings. And ultimately, the warning is going to come down to a couple of key factors. Number one, the king is going to be able to do whatever it is he wants to do. Whether that's good, whether it's right, whether it's fair, he will have the power to do whatever he wants. With God as their ruler, they knew what God expected of them. They knew what God was going to require of them. And they knew what the consequences would be if they disobeyed him. But not so with a physical king. Physical kings are fickle. Physical kings will change their mind from one minute to the next. They will take things that do not belong to them. They will otherwise insert themselves into areas that are not theirs to deal with. And Samuel says there's going to come the time when you are going to cry out for the Lord to save you, verse 18, and he will not hear you in that day. Why? Because you wanted a king. Sometimes we need to be careful what we wish for, because we just might get it. Israel's going to get it. Israel's going to get exactly what they've begged for. And it's going to have consequences that they aren't going to like. It's going to cause problems they aren't prepared to deal with. It's going to turn them away from God over the years in ways that they could not have expected. And yet it's all going to happen because they wanted to be like everybody else. They didn't want to be God's people. They wanted to be their own people like the rest of the nations of the world. And unfortunately, sometimes if we're not careful, Christians today can fall into the same category. Those are some of the things that I found in 1 Samuel chapter 8. I hope that they're beneficial to you. Next time we'll come back, and Lord willing, we will begin examining 1 Samuel chapter 9, the continuation of this account. But until then, have a great day.